without any further ado, I would like to jump into the next program point because we have so much on our agenda for today. And would like to move to a different aspects of how the 3 Rs of good science and science communication can inform the way how we responsibly communicate, and also how they can help us in our fight against misinformation. And to that end, I'm very excited that we have a fantastic panel of guests and JHU colleagues with us today, namely Dr. Chen Chu from the Office of Data Services, Dr. Beth Whipple, the Associate Director of the Welsh Medical Library, and Dr. CJ Neely, a very dear colleague from which we've known each other for quite some years, right? The Associate Director of Career Education and Curriculum Development at our institution. And we have like a little bit, like 20 minutes or so, but I'd like to ask each of you to very briefly, rather than introducing yourself, just say basically, you know, what did the 3 Rs mean to you in your practice so far, right? So like what was your relation to the 3 Rs so far? What does it mean to the positions you currently have? How did you use them? And also, what kind of role do they play in your professional practice? With maybe an emphasis on the communication aspect that we are featuring today. And I would like to get us started with Dr. Chen Chu, if you allow me to.
Okay, hi. Thank you. My name is Chen Chu, and I'm from the data services. And our services is under the library, and we help JHU researcher with data-related question. We help people like just starting from the research life cycle, how to find data, how to use data, manage data, visualize data, and share data. So our relationship with 3R is that our services focus on helping people to do their research reproducible, make their research reproducible and reusable, and then also share data responsibly. So sharing data is not just like, oh, my founder want me to do that, my journal want me to do that, and I just like put the whole hard drive into a repository and share with everybody else and call it down. So we want those data to be shared, to be useful for other people. So in order to do that, you need to provide good documentation. And then you also need to organize your file like responsibly so other people can understand your file and use your file. So we run workshop, we run consultation, and we try to go in from the education angle to help people start from the beginning of their research. They can be responsible with their data.
Thank you, Chen. Very important points as always. And also Chen actually is from a service office that supports responsible conduct of research courses since many years. And especially the communication aspects in terms of sharing and what it means to transfer data from one person to another is an aspect that is quite often underestimated. And I think your service office helps a lot in this respective aspect. Thank you so much for all you do in your service to the community. Yeah, Beth, I would like to move on to you.
Thanks, everyone. So my name is Beth Whipple. I'm the Associate Director at the Welsh Medical Library. I've been in this position for almost 3 months. So I'm still new here at Hopkins and getting used to just everything that, that is here. So from my perspective, so I oversee and manage all of the informationists here at the Welsh Medical Library, and they do a wide variety of things. But I think in this context, thinking about transparency for reproducibility, a lot of our informationists may partner with faculty on research projects and are often doing systematic reviews, meta-analyses, really exhaustive literature searches. They don't always have to be that exhaustive, but one of the things within our profession that folks are looking about is around the reproducibility of the searches that we do. So when folks meet with us, we often are making sure that we're using multiple databases, making sure we're translating searches between those databases, and then also when things are reported and when things are published, making sure that those searches are available so that they are reproducible, people can see the work that was done. Often librarians or informationists may also do peer review of those searches to make sure that we're not missing anything that is important. I think a lot of that also, some of the terms that are used within controlled vocabularies may or may not be the most current way in which things are talked about and described. And so also we have the expertise in knowing especially in an emerging area, maybe previous terms now would be, that is not how we would want to describe them. And there may be harmful terms that have been used, but understanding the history of those and maybe why we are including those is important to get the literature that you want. But when it comes to how we're describing things now, recognizing that language changes and how terms are used, and also understanding how information is structured so that we're doing the best that we can to get the information that folks need so that they can complete the research. So I think that's an area where I definitely see that we have a role around both stewardship of information and then that transparency. And I haven't met Dr. Chu yet, but I'm excited about that. I think a lot of the work that you all are doing with the JHU data services ties in with a lot of what was happening within my library, my previous place, where we are providing a lot of education around, okay, how do we manage data? How do we think about where are we storing it? How can we make sure that it's findable if you want it to be findable? How can we make sure that we have things like data catalogs, so even if people can't immediately get to the data, you know what is being done and who to talk to so you can access that. Also, in my previous role, I was more on the research side for the library. We also helped to manage the electronic lab notebook that was being used by the university to make sure that data is being captured. And from, I think, an administrative point of view, if you want to end up in the news for good reasons, not for bad. And so being able to keep track of your data, be able to show where it was stored when things were done is also really important. Thanks.
I think it cannot be emphasized enough how much libraries, informationists play, particularly in nowadays time, right? With everything coming up with AI and everything, that how important and how of a vital importance for keeping the truth, speaking of stewardship, right, is the informationists and data science and data services offices, right? Because as we all know, of course, one of the major sources of error in science is wrongly transferred information, right? In many different forms, right? In forms of data, in terms of word, in terms of not finding information, finding wrong information, giving it, transferring it wrong. So all these things are of vital importance to keep up, the integrity of science, essentially, right? So in a certain sense, you are safeguardians of in terms of the stewardship, right, of the quality and the integrity of science. So cannot emphasize this often enough, so that everybody who might be on the student side here in the audience, please always make sure that people in the data services and library offices, these are your friends, right? So definitely
We're on a topic of information literacy, which in some ways is, maybe not very sexy, right? But how do you know, basic questions about information literacy? Who's producing the information? When was it updated? How do you know if you're going to trust that information? I think that's a really important question, especially with AI. Where is this information coming from, and do you trust the sources? And I think some people just want a fast answer. And I think it is important to step back for a minute and just think about, okay, is this going to be good information for making conclusions for my research? So thanks.
Speaking of that critical thinking, right? Exactly. And of course, I wanted to make sure that we leave enough time. CJ, of course, we have known each other for quite a while, and your perspectives are always so inspiring. If you could please share your perspectives as well.
I want to first say thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of this panel discussion. I'm glad that I went last, because I think it's a really nice juxtaposition to Chen and Beth, who work more in the library side and help with the research aspect. So again, my name is CJ Neely. I've been here at Hopkins for almost 7 years now, or over 7 years. And in all of my capacities here, I have been in kind of an educational support role, where I'm really rounding out the education that our life science and public health, previously master's, currently PhD and postdoctoral trainee, get really in the lens of kind of career education and professional development. And so career education at first might not necessarily relate to this conversation, but definitely professional development, I 100% agree there's an overlap here. And so when I think of the 3 R's, and I think of how that impacts my role here at Hopkins and what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to really supplement the educational experience our biomedical and public health doctoral students and postdocs are getting. I really think about the responsibility. The responsibility of these are trainees who are going to be professionals in whatever space they go into. It's their responsibility to be able to communicate effectively. And I think that the traditional academic training has done a great job in training individuals to talk to other academics in their field at conferences, grant writing, publications. Although I was very happy to join the last presentation, the tail end, when they were talking about maybe the culture in which we operate, this pressure to publish, because that's how, that really dictates funding and things like that, which allows you to continue your research. That can put pressure to maybe not always be as responsible or rigorous or reproducible in our research. But I think if we can train our early career professionals, our scientists, our researchers, our public health practitioners to be able to know that communicating effectively to all audiences is a true responsibility. It is our responsibility. And therefore, I look at it as my role, as well as Gundala and a lot of other administrators and staff in an academic setting, that it's our responsibility to provide that training to really allow students and other scholars coming from our programs to go out and be able to, at Thanksgiving, talk to relatives about their science, about research being done at our institute, maybe combating some information that their relatives are seeing online on social media, other things. And so, I mean, maybe that's not the traditional role of higher ed, but I think in today's day and age, it should be. And I'm very grateful to have that space in the conversation. So I'll stop talking because I could probably talk forever.
Yeah, actually, CJ, couldn't agree more, of course, obviously, since we have been talking about these things at length, right? But I think, especially your point about the many other great points that, it is also our responsibility to reach out to people who have maybe not a science background and to express ourselves in a way that everybody else get something out of what we are saying, right? And we have earlier on in the day had a situation where we said the disconnect or the hostility that is around science today, right, in our relation with the public, might in part be a communication problem, right? And of course, the more we train ourselves, as well as everybody who is following up in the scientific leadership positions, in a way that we communicate better, maybe we can ameliorate this problem a little bit. And maybe this brings me to the next point, and that, CJ, I would like to start with you now. Since we have limited time, I would like to combine those questions that we had discussed ahead of time when we prepared for our panel a little bit. Where do you see the major issues resulting from non-compliance with rigor, reproducibility, and responsibility, maybe particularly, and also maybe on the flip side, where do adherence to those values that we keep hearing about, here in our session, but also in previous panels, give you ammunition to fight against negative tendencies, be that misinformation, be that uncompliance with the 3 Rs. So where do you see your sphere of influence by using those values?
I'm glad that you said my sphere of influence, because I was thinking more broadly, like, why is this happening? And I had alluded to, the pressure to publish, especially from a trainee perspective, like this, we're really trying to earn that PhD, get to further along in our career. There's a lot of imposter syndrome that maybe we want to oversell our science to show that or maybe I think another thing is not disclose the limitations of our science, because we feel the pressure to do so, whether it's individually or, from a lab perspective or a university perspective, like we want to be doing great work. And so there's that pressure to do so. I think normalizing failure is incredibly important. And I think the more we normalize that, like, not everything works. And sometimes, like, the discussion is, this didn't work out as we anticipated, because we only really celebrate the wins, the publications, the grants that are that are done, really normalizing that, research in and of itself is an incredibly difficult process, that a lot of times we're going to hit walls before we understand things, or maybe things that were previously published. Now that we have new techniques, new information, maybe it's not as straightforward as what we once thought, and we have to go back to the drawing board and rethink. It doesn't mean that people were like malicious. It was just that it was the conclusions that we were drawing at the time with the information we have. And so I think that is one thing. And then our office really tries to do more about resiliency training in academic, like with our biomedical trainees, to again normalize this failure. Another thing is, I also think that communication, learning how to communicate with a wide variety of audiences, is something that we have tried to really take on as an office. So I'm part of the Doctoral Life Design Studio, and so we run a competition each year, the 3-minute previously the 3-minute thesis, now Empower Your Pitch, which provides training leading up to anyone who wants to attend. But for those who also want to go on and do the competition, that is really about learning to communicate your research in a compelling way in 3 minutes or less. And the ability to flex your communications to different audiences, I think, is really, really key. And then the last thing I want to share, which is kind of funny because I'm a talker, is the importance in communicating is not just talking your opponent or the person who has the other perspective and just telling them how they're wrong. Part of effective communication is also listening. And so really training our students to be better listeners will help them to become better mentors, better faculty down the road, better in whatever leadership they have down the road. But it also will allow them to talk to people with varying viewpoints, really get at what is causing that misinformation and going at that with empathy and compassion, versus oftentimes, I will say, I personally feel frustrated when I hear some people express some misinformation about science, but really coming from a place of compassion, I think, is where I've had the best luck in my personal experience. So with that, I'll turn it over to the next person.
Thank you. This was so many pearls of wisdom, as always. So I always enjoy your perspective, particularly about that. So we seem to all resonate with the compassion aspect here a lot. I think we are all going to build this into our into our professional practice. Beth, I would like to continue with you.
I feel like I could just have a conversation with CJ for a long, long time. So even before you started talking, what I was thinking about is having a measure of humility, right? Science continues to change. I think, especially during the pandemic, we see how information was communicated out to folks, and we all saw the missteps that happened with that. So previously I was at just a medical school, so working with medical students. So we taught critical appraisal. So again, getting to like, what are the questions you ask to make sure that the information is good if you want to treat your patient. So a student contacted me and they had a question about a few articles. So they sent them to me, and then I sort of followed the links and realized where these were showing up on the web. And it came like through a family member, through a Facebook post. So I was like, hey, we can talk about how do we critically appraise this article, but also, essentially it was like Thanksgiving, like what are people's concerns? And let's take a step back and think, what are they really reacting to? And this relationship is important to you. So how can you share information and still not lose the relationship? And so recognizing, yeah, like some of the ways these things have been communicated to the public, and even how science is done, right? We don't always have the answer. We try things, and hopefully there is a modicum of, being able to fail. And then think how things were communicated was like, oh, people are flip-flopping, or, any of that. And so trying to figure out how can we be humble about, okay, what people are now seeing in the public eye, often this happens in the scientific process, but this isn't as visible to folks. And recognizing that, yes, things do change, and we're trying to make decisions based on the best information we have at the time, recognizing we might be wrong. And I think that's a really hard thing, especially at a prestigious institution where, you've been told you're the best, you've been held up, and so are you allowed to fail? And so I think it is a culture of recognizing when maybe it's not failing, but maybe it is wrong, or we have better information, so we're going to change our mind, and that's okay, because we're all trying to do the best that we can. So that's what comes to mind with me, and specifically thinking about, can we make sure that we are communicating well to folks who don't live in this world all the time, and also that it's okay to admit when we're wrong or when things change.
Absolutely. Wonderful, especially in terms of the values of science, right? Openness and fairness kind of demand that we are honestly sharing when we are wrong, or when there are things that, you know, didn't go optimally, right? Absolutely. Wonderful points. Thank you so much for these great pearls, which are so important for our practice. And Chen, can I ask you to close us off here today? Because you see, we are already, I can't believe that the half hour is almost over. It's always so quick.
Yeah, sure. I think I will come back to the non-compliance issue that you just raised. So in our office, actually, we started by helping people to comply to the data management plan requirement that come with grant proposal. So NSF start to require this in 2011. And at that time, nobody know what is data sharing, data management. So our office start at that time to help people. But yeah, I think researchers are usually very busy, and when the new requirement come, it requires some cultural change, and people are not used to sharing their data, and they may be thinking, why I have to share data? So sometimes it will be helpful if there's some consequence coming with the compliance. So people tend, if you don't write your grant with your data management plan, then you won't get your grant. If you don't share your data, then journal won't take your papers. They won't publish your paper. But oftentimes we see that some journals are more like strict about you have to share your data. Like PLOS is one example. They really want you to share data. But some journals were like, oh, we encourage you to share data. So that does make difference for people who want to share data or not. And then also like data management plan, NSF, they don't really have a way to track if people share their data as they say in their plan. But NIH, when they start to roll out their data management and sharing plan last year, this year they start to ask people to put their data sharing, have some evidence, just like when you publish your paper, you list your publication. When you share your data, you list where you share your data. And if you don't do that in your annual report, they require you to just explain why you haven't done that.
Mm-hmm.
So our office always want to encourage people to start from the beginning, not thinking about data sharing at the end of your research, but at the beginning, because that's not something you should think about like the moment you submit your manuscript, and then you're like, oh gosh, I have to share my data. Let me see how I can do that. So start from the beginning and always document every step, because that way make your research more transparent and more trustworthy.
Yeah, especially when we talk about, you know, the requirement for openness. We want it on the receiving end, but on the giving end, it's a lot of work, and we need to really make sure that we plan ahead and think about this from early time onwards. And the data sharing, the proper management and sharing is our responsibility. Speaking of responsible conduct, in order to not only store information, but also transmit it to others. So that's part of communication, right? This is part of communicating our science by making it possible that those communication pathways exist. CJ.
I will say, Chen, I appreciate you saying this, because I do a lot of training that is with our graduate students and postdocs about, you know, or like for, let's just say, graduate students about how to maybe have conversations about publication order, like who is going to be first author on a publication if they're initiating a collaboration. I will now make sure as we move forward that we also talk about the importance of data management when talking about thinking about future publications or collaborations internally or externally. So thank you.
Thank you all. This was so insightful, right? And we have been working together partly since quite some years, but I always learn something. It's always something that is great to know. And I see we have a comment in the chat box from Brenda. Brenda, do you want me to read this, or do you want to comment?
I'll comment. So actually, this is in reflection to the discussions misinformation, or not necessarily misinformation, but the information in society and what's out there on the web in applications to the work that I do. You know, AI is already incorporated into some areas of medical research slash transitioning into medical practice. So it's really important, like when they discuss machine learning, machine learning is based on iterative process where it's collecting information from what's on the web. I don't personally use it, so I can't speak firsthand, but I know like with what they say about ChatGPT and all these things, it's what's available. So there's filtering, but with with these technologies, the machines are just evolving much faster than we anticipated. So I don't think, again, what CJ was saying, it's necessarily malicious. It's about what's available, the information available at the time. And so we might not know until years later whether or not that information is correct. I feel like concepts here that I'm learning need to be more structured and incorporated into the evolving disciplines.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if that makes sense
Yeah,
to the
absolutely.
audience here.
Thank you for that, Brenda. Definitely a very important comment. And I would like to turn it over to Ilinka, because Ilinka has a little bit the eye on, and Tamaki also the eye on our time, because we are a bit behind schedule, but we have quite a few interesting comments. And since we have a town hall coming up, maybe you both have the better feeling of how we can incorporate both the comments that we have in the chat and the program, so that we be respectful of everybody's point and can include everybody's discussion in the next point. So I wanted to thank CJ, Chen, and Beth for this wonderful discussion and for making time out of your very busy schedules for us, and invite you to stay on. But I would like to thank you very much for the comments and for your sharing your wisdom. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was so wonderful. Thank you all. I just wanted to mention, I think with communication comes, like you all said, some humility, and also I think collaboration is really important.